Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 29 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
Today, Colin, I am like Janus, the Roman god.
Because you're two-faced?
No, Colin, no, because I am the ending in the beginning. I am the Alpha and the Omega. So I'm Janus. I'm also a bit like JC, Christ. We're looking back on the end of not just SC, but Trails in the Sky, FC, and SC, the end of the Joshua and Estelle arc of this epic series.
I think
We're
that it's
looking
fitting.
forward.
I think that it's fitting that you compared yourself to Jesus Christ, given that this is releasing on Christmas. So happy birthday to everybody. Not happy birthday. And Merry Christmas to everybody who celebrates.
And
And
happy
happy
birthday to
birthday,
JC.
Jesus.
I'm excited to talk about the game as a whole, the two games as a whole, big picture stuff. Last week was the epilogue of SE. And this week is we're doing these two massive games together. It should be a great episode.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I kind of like these retrospectives because so often in our chapters, and we're mainly dealing with plot, we're dealing with characterization, but this is a nice opportunity for us to remember that they are video games and we have to evaluate the holistic experience. I mean, we spend a lot of the time doing gameplay, but we don't talk a lot about the gameplay. So, Kevin, do we want to start about talking about the plot of SC as a whole?
Yeah, and we're not going to do a recapitulation. We've done that through 9 chapters already. We want to answer this broad question. Is the plot satisfying? Do we think so? Yes, why? No, why? One. Two, how do we consider the plot of SE? More on its own or more in conjunction with FC if we bear in mind, like you've said a number of times, this was meant to be one half of one game.
Right.
Does this function, first off, does this function as an independent game?
Well, I want to start thinking about that question by asking a different question, which is, does it matter? The reason why I ask that is because whether or not we see this as the second half of the duology, like as in this was originally one game that they just split into two, and we should consider it one game, or we consider it just a second game. Either way, we're still having the context of the last game. It's still related in gameplay. It's still related in music and locales and everything. So, I mean, I'm the one who posed this question when we put together the document, but the more I think about it, I don't really know what it means to consider SC on its own.
That's a good way of looking at things. We cannot help but compare and contrast. It's satisfying as a standalone game. That's so difficult to answer because no sane person would ever jump into Trails in the Sky SC as their first introduction to the series.
Yeah, like
The anime OVA would. Like I said, no sane person.
yeah, I'm looking forward. We're going to be watching that together after we record this episode, and I'm really looking forward to that. But I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are some people who have played SC first. I'm not really sure how they get to that point, but I am more than happy to say that this is not a good entry point into the series, and that a lot of people are going to be lost if they just throw themselves into SC. But that's not how the game is intended to be played.
No. So this raises a question we asked all the way back in the prologue episode. How do we judge sequels?
This comes down to whether we believe the principle, and maybe this answers my question that I had just posed. Uh, if you're looking at gameplay systems, then we have to ask the question: does this game iterate on the Trails formula while and yet improving upon it enough for it to be considered its own game versus like an expansion pack or something like that? Or is it basically the first game again, but with a different story? And I think that in this case, like framing it in these terms kind of show what it means to consider SC as a standalone game, as in just this game on its own merits versus in context with FC.
So let's answer this question with yet another question if we can go further down the rabbit hole. Do we think the loose threads, the plot points that were left hanging or raised in FC, especially in the end, were they answered in a satisfactory manner, do you think?
So the plot threads that were left were Olivier's real identity, Lawrence's real identity, what Ouroboros is, what Joshua is going to do, Hamill, yeah, yeah. I said it in my head, I just didn't say it out loud, and what the Aureole is. I do think that all of these have been answered. Obviously, we know who Olivier is now. The whole or no, okay, we don't know everything about Ouroboros, but we've learned a significant amount about it to know, like to basically say that we know what it is, right? Which is much different than what we had at the end of FC. So I do think that for the most part, maybe you can think of a place where it doesn't answer a plot thread in FC, but I can't think of one that it just ignores.
No, I think for plot, it built and expanded on what was left unresolved at the end of FC and what was resolved at the end of FC. It did not redig up or diminish the meaning or change retroactively our interpretation.
When we consider the plot of this game, we cannot separate it from FC because it's so closely tied. When we're talking about gameplay systems, we have to keep FC in mind, but I do think, well, if we just compare it to FC and ask, did this improve on the gameplay of FC? The answer is going to be, it's FC's gameplay. It didn't really improve. So we have to decide if that is something that we need to take into account. That's basically an iteration with like a couple of tweaks. I mean, I think one thing that we have to talk about before we wrap a bow on the plot question is what do we think about the pacing? Because when you look at the chapter pacing throughout the whole game, it's kind of like it's predictable in the same way that a BioWare RPG is predictable. Every chapter is going to focus on a specific character. For the first four, you're going to see an enforcer. You're going to meet them for the first time, have your little adventure of the day while you are there. Sometimes I get the feeling that it's like I'm waiting for the plot to begin, which it only really starts to begin in chapter five. But the face that you're making suggests that you don't agree.
Oh no, I think the pacing here is much better than FC, and it's because I'm going to disagree with you a bit strongly here. I think the plot does not begin in chapter five. One of the things that I identify and I like quite a bit in SE as compared to FC is we know the what goal the characters are striving towards. That's much more explicit. It's find Joshua and the society, or figure out what the society is doing and stop their plans. In FC, what's Cassius? Where is he doing? That mystery serves chapter one, and that's basically it. And the rest is go become full-fledged senior bracers, go to all the towns. We don't get the whole coup and the society until at the very end. So it felt, I don't want to say aimless, but it was, I think, much more the BioWare formula, whereas here it felt we were progressing, making inroads on a known larger goal much earlier than FC.
I mean, I just don't agree. And that's fine that we don't agree. But to me, like I agree with the main point that we have the goal, which is to beat Ouroboros and find Joshua. And we also then get introduced to sub goals, which is stop the enforcers. But the first half of the game is it's very formulaic. You arrive in a town, you do some quests, a weird thing happens, you find an enforcer, and then you fight that enforcer through some means. Now, while we're doing that, we do get some interesting characterization, and some of that is even done through the encounter with the enforcer, which could be interesting. But in terms of the overall plot, I do feel like you're just running around going from location to location up until the moment that Estelle gets kidnapped and thrown onto the courageous, gets thrown onto the glorious, and that is the pivotal moment in which the characters have agency, where like shit goes down. That to me, that's when the plot starts.
So you're saying it's broadly similar then to FC, where it took
Yeah,
until about two-thirds of the game.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even say two-thirds, but like a solid half of it is kind of dedicated towards this more meandering world building section before you get to the plot heavy section.
Okay, so we're all on the same page. You are not saying that the plot the first half of FC is bad in any way. It's just it more you say it mirrors FC more than I think it does.
Yeah. And I mean, I am complaining about that pacing, to be sure. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have brought it up. But of course, I want to say, because I don't think I've said it explicitly, of course, this plot is amazing, especially once you get to the second half. And I remember playing through it for the first time. I mean, I couldn't put the controller down. I just fell in love with it. It's the reason why why I'm replaying this entire series, and we have a weekly show talking about this series. If these plots weren't good, we would not be here.
So I see what you're saying. And I guess I want to interrogate why I feel the way I do, because you are right. We don't make much direct progress on the Joshua question for a lot of SC. And if we're being honest, the Scooby game does not resolve the Joshua question. Joshua comes to Estelle on the Glorious. What they did beforehand to do this assignment to defeat the enforcers, that made a difference for Uroboros, but not much of any, I would say, for reuniting Estelle with Joshua. She ran a lot in place on that front, if that makes sense. But it felt in the moment like we were actively trying and doing something. So that maybe us running in place, but it didn't feel like it, maybe that's the key. And that's something to commend.
I see what you're saying because each chapter has a goal that you see in pretty much in the beginning, right? Here's a mysterious phenomenon, go figure it out. We don't have long stretches of like say the Jenna's Royal Academy where the whole point is to just hang out and see what everybody's doing for this performance or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
I liked it. It was very good world building, very good characterization, but it's certainly a pace breaker, and we didn't have anything like that.
So one prediction I had is about Joshua's family. I predicted that Joshua knew Kieran somehow, that he was her sister, his brother, she was his sister. I said maybe Lawrence is from wherever they were, or they had like a family there and Libero destroyed it in the war, or maybe before the war. And overall, I think that's fairly on the mark.
I mean, the whole Hamel incident is the fact that you just spouted out the Erebonian propaganda version that incited the
Yeah.
war. Which, I mean, when you predicted that, I was like so close to being like, man, you were right there.
But then I went and said, no, I bet she's his mom, Kieran.
So, one thing that we do have to touch on when it comes to the plot, though, is that so FC is pretty much a political plot, right? It's a coup.
Yeah.
There's some weird stuff going on with technology, but mostly political story. And for a lot of SC, we see more of these supernatural elements. Some of them are expressed through like the artifacts or the gospels, but some of it is just like straight up magic. I mean, look at the Oriole or Aureole, however we're going to pronounce that. We really should set a standard pronunciation for that. Or find out what it is. I bet you that the OVA is going to tell us. But the question becomes, were they successful in introducing these supernatural elements?
Yes. And I'm going to say why, because they were presented in a non supernatural way. Sufficiently advanced technology cannot be distinguished from magic. And that is what how I viewed the presentation of the Septarians, of the Aureole, and so forth. Technology unimaginable beyond the baseline 50 years after the Orbital Revolution.
See, I feel like the Aureole breaks that rule because that is not a piece of technology. That is a gift from Ideos herself that can literally cause miracles to happen.
I want to push back a tiny bit. The way it looks, like a floating ship with engines, floating city with engines and the tram lines, it screams super advanced technology.
Oh, the city
Technology.
does,
The
yes.
Aureole itself, yeah,
No, no, okay, but we need to stop confusing the city with the Aureole because the city is
yeah.
not the Aureole.
I get that, but I'm going to disagree a tiny bit. And at the Aureole, we don't see much of it. We see it. We see it moving and making itself felt in the world and through the records through technological, say, filters, adaptations, conduits, whatever.
There's one time in which we see it directly, and that's when Weissman fuses with it and becomes an eldritch demon.
Okay, yes, that's a bit spooky. Okay, yes, and there's also the weird tower realities in chapter 7.
Yeah, the whole interdimensional stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to go say the epilogue, sufficiently advanced technology. I felt the alternate reality they didn't try to BS an explanation of like wormholes, science, whatever. They just said, it's a fucking alternate reality, deal with it.
And I will say, I don't think I'm giving anything away by bringing this up. And it's not leading to something in Trails the Third. I promise.
Thank
Kind
God.
of, kind of. In any case, this kind of like alternate dimension does pop up again throughout the series, mostly in Cold Steel and in Kuro. And I could suppose a little bit in Crossbell. Yeah, it appears basically throughout. So this is not the last time that we're going to be seeing it. And I think a question that we're going to have to ask is at some point, do they explain this properly? Do they introduce it properly?
Do they need to explain it?
I mean, at some point, they're going to have to.
What level? Like what needs to be explained? How you get there? What the rules are? What it means for normal reality? What exactly?
All right. So the reason why I think that things need to be explained, well, A, there's a character way later that is like clearly from another dimension, and we need to figure out what's going on with him. But more important, there's a fan theory. So you know that in the next releases from NIS America for Trails, we have Trails from Azure coming out, we have Trails into Reverie coming out, and then we have Nayuda, which is not in the sequence of all of the games, and it's a spinoff originally released for the PSP, but never released in America. It's basically an Ease game, but with the Trails moniker. And the weird thing there is that there's a couple of, if you look at the main character and you look at of Nayuda and you look at the box art of Hajimari, which has the Grand Master of Ouroboros on it, they look like they could be the same person. And I believe it's the last name of the heroine of Nayuda. Her last name is Herschel, which is also the last name of Toa in Cold Steel. So there's been a couple of fan theories about how that game relates to the rest of the Trails games, and that's something we'll have to get into. But that's kind of the stuff that needs to be explained.
You mean the absurdly powerful student council president who looks 12 but is actually in her early 20s?
Yeah, I'm actually really
Whatever.
excited for us playing the Crossbell games because these are based off of the Kai versions that put her in those games, and I want to see what that looks like.
Well, that should be interesting with a different graphic technology indeed. Um, so is the game successful in introducing supernatural elements? I'm fine with the very minimal explanations that we got, which is basically don't think about it too hard.
So I differ from you in my approach to this kind of thing, and that's because I've played through the Kingdom Hearts series and I've been burned. I have been asked over and over again by that series to just accept whatever supernatural cockamamie crap Tetsuya Nomura has thrown into that game. And after, however, 9 games in that series, I am done with waiting for him to explain himself. So when it like, if like the first game or the second game is throwing wacky stuff at you and there's still the plausibility that it can be explained, I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to let that mystery happen. At some point, I need mechanics. I need to know how this stuff works. Because if there aren't rules in the explained to me, that means that the people writing the story also don't know the rules and can just make up stuff as they go, and that creates an incomprehensible storyline.
Okay, you want internal consistency then.
I want internal consistency that I can figure out. Let's talk about characters because I mean, obviously, we've talked a lot about characters throughout this podcast, and as you've mentioned, some of the arcs really come into their own in SC, right? Some of them don't really get development, and you posit the hypothesis, which I think is correct, that they basically have done their arcs in FC. We're thinking here specifically of Chloe and Tita. That therefore the developers didn't really know what to do with them in this game.
Neither of us want to retread the same ground for a second or a third time of raising the same issues again with Chloe and with Tita. What we do want to talk about is a lot. of the what you could call character development for these and others came through optional scenes that you could miss. What do we think of this strategy? It's like a support system in say Fire Emblem, in which it comes through the avatar and the character, and it cannot impact the main plot because you may never unlock those supports in that playthrough or whatever.
See, I don't think it's a good comparison to make with the support system because the support system in Fire Emblem games also have gameplay ramifications and something that you earn towards maybe not so much in Three Houses, but in the rest of the game, something that you actually have to like exists and that you're working towards. With these optional things, and specifically, I'm thinking about bringing party members to specific enforcer fights. And I'm thinking about exploring all of the optional content in chapter 8 that neither of us did. On the one hand, it does seem a little bit hypocritical to complain about content that I missed because I chose not to do it. Right? It's optional. I made that option to not do it, and that's on me. At the same time, I'm sure that there was characterization of Chloe in Yennis Royal Academy. Like, of course, there had to be. I know that there's characterization of Tita, and these are two characters that have been sorely underexplored throughout the game. And the reason why you feel like you should skip them is because the entire chapter is about urgency. It's about running to the next location to drop off the zero field connector before other shit goes down, right? Even though the game tells you to slow down and take your time, the feeling of the chapter is that you should not. And so I would have preferred it if this chapter was a bit more enforcing the slowing down. Okay, you get to this Bracer Guild. What can we do to help? Oh, go follow these quests. And I don't know, 2 out of the 3 of them are required quests that you have to go do. And then you can make sure that everybody sees the development of those characters, as well as ensure that people get to see that content as opposed to having 2 different reward structures, as it were.
How much would this have been remedied by a gameplay fix of making it easier to switch characters, say in the epilogue, at the Apex Tower?
It cannot just be it's easier to go grab them and bring them back up. Because as I mentioned before in this podcast many times, I don't use Tita and I don't use Chloe, which means that if I were to bring them to an enforcer fight, I would either have to spend like 30 minutes grinding or they would die immediately.
Or should the solution have been levels experience goes to the entire people you have in your party, whether they're like active or reserve them?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a very elegant way of doing it. It's something that Trails games do later on down the line. That was not in vogue when these games were made, so it's a little bit of an archaic design choice. I don't blame the
Yeah.
game for it, but I also don't like it when games mean that if they're not in the fight, then they don't get experience because it just means that you're basically tied into a party after a certain amount.
And let's not forget, these games came out in like what, oh 04, oh 05, oh 06.
I mean, these are. I know that. I think one of our first episodes, you said you don't want to play retro games. You want every game to look amazing, and all of this stuff. And yet, here we are, essentially having a retro game podcast.
I've converted out of my wrong ways.
Well, I'm glad that you've repented, heretic, and Kevin would be quite pleased with you. Let's talk about
So
our favorite characters, though. What are your top 3?
now, I'm not sure there's a top like 1, 2, 3, but a more rank is fluid among this top 3. Kevin's going to be in there. I always felt there was something more going on with him. He was too in the know. He was a bit too many coincidences. Something was off about him. He was not what he claimed. He was more than what he claimed he was. Seeing this cold fury as he killed Weissman, that immediately shot him up. He didn't dither and dawdle, didn't whine about the moral cost. He saw what he viewed as a huge problem, left unresolved. He took direct and drastic action.
Yeah, I am a big fan of Kevin as well. In my top 3, he's got to be in there, basically for the same reasons that you've said. Plus, after Trails the Third, I'm a huge Kevin fan after that game. My another one that I want to highlight, it has to be Olivier. I mean, especially for political junkies like you and me, but just in terms of he was amazing in FC and he continues to be amazing in SC with the added dimension of now we know who he actually is. And his arrival on the stage uh, to stop an invasion of Liberl is one of the best scenes in this entire series, in my opinion.
He's complex, but he puts on different facades in such a way it's facets of who he really is, and there's common facets. So you feel it's similar and foreign all at the same time.
It's almost like he's a Janus, two different sides of the
Yeah.
same coin.
Olivier would be that for me. Also, because for all his Olivier that goes on, his weird ass shit, he doesn't demean people or doesn't put them down. Like sometimes, a lot of times, he goes too far. Treat people like Estelle or Shara or whatever badly,
No,
if this makes sense.
all of his humor is ultimately self-deprecating. In fact, he's often the one making the joke or making the comments that he knows would make people laugh at him, which I think is, I know it's a weird way to measure a man, but I think it's the sign of a good man when you do stuff like that.
So, one of my favorite characters, I'm going to have someone not in the party. I like Weissman a lot. He's not one dimensional. He's clearly bad and in the wrong, but you can see where he began and his concerns. Like I said last episode, he's not in this because he wants money and power. He's in this for a cause. And I like people who have causes, even if they're awful, awful causes. And this is not a good cause. He has a vision, an ideology. He's not driven by base concerns.
Okay, I can see that. I don't think I would rank Weissman in my top three because I thought about who my top three would be, and I think I got to put Luva in there because
Really.
yeah. I mean, number one, there's the coolness factor. He's the Blade Lord. He's riding a dragon. There's something enticing just about that aesthetic. But also, I admire people who have an inner nobility, even if other things are kind of getting in the way of that. I know that you can look at him and say, well, why didn't you just do the thing I wanted you to do? But he's dealing with like this huge inner darkness, right? That he feels like he's been betrayed by humanity. He has hatred for humanity, and he's motivated by that. But through that also shines this inner nobility and care for the other that we see evidenced by him minimizing the damage in Bose, saving the orphans from the orphanage that he burned down to his last moments protecting Joshua, because at the end, that's what truly guides him. That's what truly touches him. And I got a lot of respect for that.
I see this. I'm gonna make a comparison you're gonna hate. Are
Yeah,
you ready?
sure. I'm ready.
I see this in the same view. I see all those anti-Hitler Wehrmacht generals in World War II and before. Just fucking shoot him. Don't do all this secret defiance or misinterpreting orders. If you feel that strongly, have the courage to just shoot him, cut Weissman's head off, and accept you're most likely gonna die. Defect. Don't enact a bad cause with half effort. Either do the right thing or don't.
I mean, I can see how that opinion is um, enticing, and especially once you bring the ad Hitlerum comparison, that kind of shuts down. Well, I don't know that kind of debate. But if we're thinking about other instances, I mean, I think Tacitus would have to disagree with you when he's writing the Agricola, where the entire point of that work is to show how Agricola can be a righteous, upstanding man, even when serving an awful emperor like Domitian. I don't want to make any kind of modern political parallels or anything, so I'm not going to. But there are certainly times in politics where people feel that the best that they can do is try to blunt evil from the inside. And I do respect that because of the people, like, we can sit here and look at them at an individual level and say, you should have just taken the most drastic action to solve the problem, even if that wouldn't have ended up solving the problem. But because they were there to blunt the evil was blunted. If they're not there, somebody who might not blunt the evil could be there. And so I respect that.
But let's stick to trails here. He knew, Roosevelt Lawrence knew of a route he could take. Joshua's route. He knew there was a way to go out and be an active force for good in the world. And Joshua, as a junior bracer, as a member of the Bright family, as a bracer in
Okay,
training, was
hold up.
doing good.
Bullshit. Because Joshua, let's not forget, was beaten within an inch of his life and then allowed by Ouroboros to be a free agent, even though the entire time he was actually under Weissman's control. And it's not like Luva
Okay,
didn't know about the stigma.
I'm not saying he should have got his ass whooped, but Luva could have gone and been a bracer somewhere
No, I don't think
after
he.
just chopping off Weissman's head.
I don't think. No, bullshit. I'm sorry. He turns over Joshua to Weissman to repair him. In return, he agrees to be an enforcer. So number one, right there, when he's like, I don't know, 12 years old, having dealt with the tragedy of Hamel, no, he's not going to go and become a bracer. That's just not going to happen. And then, you bring up Joshua as a comparison of the path that Luva could have taken, when this is a path that he is allowed to take by Ouroboros. And then in the end, Weissman is still trying to assert control over him, like at the very end with the stigma. It's only because of Joshua's relationship with Kevin that he could break free of it. But if we're going to say that Luva needs to follow the path of Joshua, he kind of does, because he does, act as an enforcer and listen to Weissman's commands up until the end, just like Joshua does. And then at the end, breaks free and does a heroic moment in order to get rid of Weissman completely, which Joshua also does. The only difference is that Joshua lives.
Luva, in those instances he makes the rough edges more smooth. The actualization of Weissman's plan would do a lot more bad than whatever good Luva did, and he was supporting Weissman's plan.
People can be flawed individuals and still be good on the inside. I am not going to give up. I like Luva.
Now, I'm not saying he's not a flawed or a complex or well-written character. He is. I think he does good. I don't think he is good. I don't think he merits forgiveness.
Remind me to never have you on a jury when I'm the defendant. Yeah, so we should talk about this, and we've been alluding to it from the beginning, but like there are two gameplay improvements that I can see. No, I'm sorry. There are three mechanical additions that I can see in this game. Maybe I'm missing some, but they are combo crafts, they are more varied forms of the side quest, and they are usable items in the overworld, like the orbital camera or the gospel that you use in very specific situations. Out of these, I don't know about you, but once again, I never once used a combo craft after the tutorial. And the usable items every single time, other than the one where you're like positioning yourself to get a good picture at the top of the tower, it could have just been press A and use it automatically.
Okay. I didn't use Combo Craft much either. And let's talk a bit about them. I think they were an interesting design choice that was ultimately flawed. It took CP from both of them, obviously, and it took the turn order. It added a delay. So it could be a very dangerous gamble. That extra damage needed to be worth more than, say, a buff, or healing, or an impede, or whatever.
And I don't think that it ever was. But to be fair, I didn't really experiment with it much. One difference that we should point out between me and you is that I played this game on normal. I thought you were playing on normal as well after the hell experience you had with FC. But you told me a couple of days ago that you actually beat this on hard.
Yeah, there was no pulling a Kevin this game. No weaken enemies and try again.
Yes, there was. I definitely pulled a Kevin a couple of times.
I meant for me, Colin. I
Oh,
don't care
okay.
about you.
So, what did you feel about the difficulty of this game?
I thought it was fine. I've seen it online. People say SC is the hardest game, and I thought I had a couple total party wipes a couple times, but never to the point where I got frustrated and annoyed. And
I
if it got to that point, I would have done a save game editor to change the difficulty to normal.
I lost to Luva 7 times.
Oh, It's a very simple formula. Kevin to reflect, so his S-craft doesn't do any damage, and then AoE and other such items to dispel the doppelgangers.
Here's what I would do: attack, craft, attack. Oh shit, I'm dead.
Well, arts are OP. Joshua's like Abyssal Hellscream, and that Kevin also has. It's a time orange that does the entire map, does a lot of damage. And if you have Joshua's quartzes that reduce time to cast, reduce EP cost, you can just spam that and kill basically anything.
See, this is what I hear about the series, and I don't know why I'm so resistant to it. I just don't like using arts that much. I'm fine with having like one person be an arts caster, mostly for supportive things, but in the end, Mishara has some good offensive stuff as well. But I cannot seem to get into the mentality that I should be using arts, that I should be spending more time with my quartz setup. Maybe I should do the hard thing and just set myself up on hard difficulty and force myself to engage with these systems more because I'm really not engaging with it that much.
Sounds like a you problem, Colin.
Thank you, Kevin, for that insightful reply to my musings about a gameplay system.
Well, that does say something to be serious about. You were able to go 2 games essentially and more.
I've engaged with it a bit in Cold Steel, but it's a different system in Cold Steel. The Trails in the Sky series, throughout the Crossbell series, I don't really use arts that much.
And that raises some questions. Is this a design flaw? Then that you do not feel the need to use a very major component to gameplay.
This is I think it's something that we talked about in a sidebar a while ago. If I didn't bring up this example, I'm going to bring it up now. Ys Memories of Celceta, which is another Falcom game, has a lot of systems in it that when I played it, they felt unnecessary because I didn't really have to use them in order to beat the game. But I was playing on normal, and I was told by multiple people that if you play it on hard, all of a sudden these systems become essential. And so the same might be true for Trails, in which case it's a good
Mhm.
thing that they are providing us with different difficulty options so that we can choose to have that harder experience. Um, but it is up to me to muster the courage to go and do that.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. So do you think you'll be doing other games on a difficulty then?
In the Trails series, yeah, I think I'll give Trails the Third a shot on hard. It's really more gameplay focused anyway.
I'm gonna be doing on the third on hard, and maybe after a couple games, switch to Nightmare. We'll see.
Good luck with that, man. I have no plans to do Nightmare. One thing that I noticed about this game that was different from FC is that with FC, you said that you thought the soundtrack was okay, which I still do not understand to this day. But there's been a couple of times where even you have praised the soundtrack in SC.
Even me.
So I'm wondering like what makes this a better soundtrack to you than an FC?
Well, I'm not playing it muted quite as much or at all.
Yes, having the ability to listen to the fucking game is going to help you appreciate it.
Well, I played a lot of FC in meetings,
That's true. That's
watching
true.
TV.
Well, watching TV, you can just choose to play, but when you're playing it at work, you kind of have to mute it.
There were some elements I remember that stick out in my memory. Joshua and Estelle on the beach, the reunion,
Mm.
the music, beautiful, complemented the serious, not sad, but not entirely happy mood. The ethereal tones in the towers I felt created and helped the atmosphere of that this was not normal. We are in a someplace else. I felt the vibe was a lot better. I'm not sure why in SC with the music, but it was quite good.
What I really like about this soundtrack is that I mean, some of the new tracks are fantastic. Back to Friends, amazing. I really like, I think it's called Silver Will, but basically the big boss music that's playing when you're fighting Luba and stuff like that. What I really like too is its creative reuse of certain themes that we originally saw in FC. The example that comes to mind is A Challenger Enters, which is initially it's the song that plays when you're in the arena in Grand Cell. And it's used a couple of times that last chapter of the game. But here it's used as a motif to indicate something heroic is happening, right? So the fight between Joshua and Luva is it's playing. When Zen intercedes to save you from Walter, it starts to play, and like it starts to play right before Zen comes in, and like that moment is when I realized that that was my favorite song of Trails in the Sky, just because the way that they used it and meshed it with the game, with the narrative, it's out of this world. And I absolutely love that song now. Whereas in FC, it was a good song, but it wasn't like super memorable to me.
It acquired iconic status.
All right, Kevin. So let's wrap it up. We got two last things that we got to talk about. One is ranking of the game, what number score we're going to give it, and also we got to hear your predictions for Trails the Third because I've left a lot of trails for you to follow, as it were, and I want to see what you're guessing.
Fuck off with that pun, for one. Two, rankings, I would say this to me just better. FC, I was always fine with take it slow. Don't get burnt out. Gotta be deliberative. Not because I didn't like it, but I liked it a lot. But I didn't know. But some parts late in the game of SC in this game, I really wanted to just continue playing. I did not
Yeah,
want to wait. I wanted to move on, which that's the mark of a successful game. It
absolutely.
hooks you. How about you?
Yeah, I don't remember what grade I gave Trails FC, but if I gave Trails FC a 9.5, I demote it to a 9 so I can give this a 9.5. There are some problems in the characterization in particular,
Yeah,
and I don't think that Chain Crafts is really a good innovation. But uh, I do agree, especially when I played it the first time. I mean, I was sucked into this game when I played it during the height of COVID. It was just it consumed everything. And while I loved FC, this game is the one that made me realize that I was going to play through that entire series in like the span of 5 months because it was just that good that it made me into a fan.
that game. Cannot wait to see what the series has to offer and what the next entry in the series has to offer. So I predict that with the focus on Kevin, you're going to learn much more about the church as an institution. I bet these star doors glimpses into the past. So we see a lot more of these septarians about the fall of Zemuria. We'll see what happened in what became Erebonia, Calvert, maybe Crossbell, to make it so that what happened with the Oriole was not the sole one. But also, Colin, septarians, there's seven of these, yeah?
Yep.
Liberal, Erebonia, Calvert, even Crossbow as only four. That leaves three more. I wonder if we'll get an accounting for where did they go? What happened to them? That could be highly interesting. I bet we'll learn more about Kevin's backstory. I bet he's a tragic figure ultimately. And that his background, and I bet something tragic happens to him, or he does something maybe that crosses a moral line. I bet we don't see Joshua and Estelle. So the star doors are important. So I predict history, relationships, truth, and lies. All of these will be hugely important themes for the game.
So if you think that Joshua and Estelle won't be in the game, what characters do you expect to see?
I would not be surprised if there was maybe only one at most two party members from the past two games.
Okay.
So Kevin, maybe Kevin and like Agate, Shara, one of those two. I don't think any of the others.
Okay. And I mean, I've told you that it's going to be set in Liberal. What do you think the overall plot's going to be, or what kind of locations are we going to see? Do you have any inkling of that?
I bet something with the society really on them because Kevin is was sent to observe them to because of them. He was sent because of the artifacts, maybe about the Zamirian civilization, but these societies also really interested in them. So about maybe it's a race, something trying to start to get them before Ouroboros does.
Okay. Well, we will have to see how accurate you are. We will be waiting for that because we're going to start playing that in February. But with that, Kevin, I think that we have finished our retrospective. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, it's we're ending a great game, and endings can be sad, but we're going to begin something new, and that's the way life is.
Absolutely. Uh, this was a great game. I'm looking forward to coming back to the series. I am looking forward to our break. But we're not done quite yet. Next two episodes are going to be about the novels, and they're going to be about the OVA. And Kevin and I have been eagerly awaiting watching this OVA, which we're going to be doing tonight.
I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.